To have a little history with our camping. So if we see some road signs that say there's a historical place or some place of interest, we just have to pull over and take a look.
One of our favorite destinations is battlefields. Whether it's the Civil War, the Revolution, the War of 1812, anything with fortifications or cannons or old barracks, stuff like that.
And here's just a few that we've visited.
We're headed out to Saratoga Battlefield right now. We just passed the Saratoga racetrack, and now we're going over the freeway. And we're starting our auto tour now of the Saratoga Battlefield. It's a one-way loop, and it takes they said it takes about a half an hour if you don't stop, but I'm sure we will stop.
It's just about 9-10 miles, I think.
This is the Nielsen farm. There's a little replica house up there that would have, I guess, looked much like that during the Revolution. But then the reason this is significant was that there was a big battle fought out here between Burgoyne's British troops and Gates's Colonials, that the Colonials eventually won. They were the two battles of Saratoga. The reason the Colonials chose this little house on top of the hill to make their stand against Burgoyne is for that exact reason. It's on top of the hill and it commanded the high ground over the field down below. And that was their strategical advantage over Burgoyne. This is where they fought what they call the Battle of Bemis Heights. It's actually the second of the two battles of Saratoga, and it was the one that the Colonials wound up soundly thrashing Burgoyne and ending his campaign into New York. I don't know if you can see in the video here those little white stakes going down the left side of the field and out at the end of the field. Well, these were the demarcation points of American fortifications that they built after clearing this field of trees in order to stop Burgoyne and his British army.
It says that the John and Lydia Nielsen gave up their house and got out of the way because they knew they were in the path of the invading army, but it said later that the house was taken over by Generals Benedict Arnold and Enoch Poor.
There were actually two significant battles fought here during the War of 1812 between the United States and Britain, and our fledgling country won them both. After the Revolution, America occupied the southern coast of Lake Ontario, but the Brits were still firmly entrenched along the northern coast, and they were feeling belligerent. The British were repelled both times as they attempted to capture the shipbuilding yard in Sackett's Harbor and cut America off from the St. Lawrence Seaway.
And they have a little walking tour around the place. The buildings aren't open right now until a little later in the summer when they have more people to look after and man the buildings. Again, there's the harbor, and you can see some masts from some ships there, and here's the cannons that might have been used during that battle right out there to Lake Ontario. This is sort of what the harbor in here looks like, and this is about where we are. And it said that they had the Americans had three two-gun batteries of guns, and there's a noisy dog right here at the edge so that they could shoot out at the ships. And they said that they didn't use regular sailors, they used people from the town and invalid sailors to man the guns. This area was actually the site of Fort Tompkins, where there was the fort here to sort of protect this little cove here of Sackett's Harbor. And it says the War of 1812 was on Navy Point, named for the Governor Tompkins, and garrisoned by U.S. soldiers and Marines.
This is a monument that was erected by the Daughters of 1812, and it commemorates the officers and men who served on the frontier and in the War of 1812, and most specifically the Battle of Sackett's Harbor.
This is Chalmette Battlefield, site of the Battle of New Orleans, one of the most important battles in the War of 1812 for a couple of reasons. For one, it introduced the world to American General Andrew Jackson, who would later become our country's 7th president. Secondly, it ended the attempt by Britain to retake America after the Revolution. Facing a much larger force, Jackson's men defeated the British in less than 30 minutes, ending their Gulf campaign. It would be the final major battle of the War of 1812. These are the fortification lines for the Battle of New Orleans, with the cannons there, and another, probably at that time, a swamp, and with all the soldiers fighting out here in the middle with those cannons constantly shooting. The Rodriguez plantation that was part of Andrew Jackson's military post at the Battle of New Orleans. And he had a clear view up there of the Mississippi River, which is just beyond that wall. This would have been what Andrew Jackson saw from the mansion along the Mississippi River. Now that he was tracking the British boats, now all you see are big tankers.
This is the Maryland Monument at the site of the Battle of Antietam during the Civil War. It was fought in 2 days in September of 1862, and the first day of the battle goes down in American history as the bloodiest day ever. They had over 22,000 casualties, and the battle was fought right along in here, out there onto that field. It was sort of a who's who of American Civil War history. It was the first ever meeting between field level forces led by Robert E. Lee of the South and McClellan of the North on Northern territory. Before then there had just been skirmishes, and although the North suffered more casualties, it was considered a turning point for the North because they drove Lee back into his southern territory in Virginia, and while they didn't pursue him, so it wasn't a total victory, it was a turning point for Northern forces. Now look at the beautiful fall color here now. This battlefield at Antietam is much like the Gettysburg battlefield, where they have a very nice little driving tour. We're going past the cornfield right now. There's the Indiana Memorial. There was a lot of fighting in this area. It was the U.S. Army was Goodrich's brigade, Greene's division, and they fought in this area against several southern divisions. It got pretty bloody out there.
This battle at Antietam was supposed to be the bloodiest battle of the Civil War on September 17, 1862, and there were 22,720 casualties of both the North and the South. This is dedicated to Clara Barton, who a lot of you know was a famous nurse, but I didn't realize she was famous for doing and bringing supplies during the Battle of Antietam.
This is called Lower Bridge, or now it's called Burnside's Bridge, I guess. This is where General Burnside of the North finally caught up with Lee and forced him back across Antietam Creek toward Sharpsburg, and that sort of turned the tide of this battle here. Gettysburg is one of those places we keep going back to, for a variety of reasons. First, the battlefield is huge, and there's so much to see. And the town itself is historically significant, full of shops and restaurants and museums. But probably most important of all, the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg was almost certainly the turning point of the Civil War, handing Robert E. Lee his first major defeat. So this is the area where the war actually started, or where this battle, started. Lee's army came from this direction, and the Northern Army came from the other way.
This is the Eternal Life Peace Memorial that the Confederate soldiers helped to erect after the war, and as you can tell, it's a very popular place among the bus tours to come visit. There are all kinds of people here. This probably looks very impressive at night because it's probably lit up and everything, and right on the bottom there's a little saying by Abraham Lincoln that says, "With firmness in the night as God gives us to see the right." There's the monument to the Iron Brigade. The Iron Brigade was one of the first brigades and troops to start fighting here at Gettysburg, and that was on July 1st, 1863. Union General John Reynolds, and he was part of that Iron Brigade, he brought in, I don't know, a couple thousand troops to fight in this area, and he yelled to his men, "Forward, forward, for God's sakes, and drive those fellows out of the woods." And it was his last words before he was shot and killed on the battlefield. We're at the North Carolina Memorial stop on the walking tour. In the distance is Seminary Ridge, and this was an interesting battlefield because the two sides set up skirmish lines that resembled back-to-back fish hooks, and that's basically the name of that battle was the fish hooks. And it was on the second day, I believe, of the Battle of Gettysburg. This is the site of Pickett's famous charge from the Confederate angle. The Confederates opened shelling on Cemetery Ridge about a mile in front of us here on July 3rd at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. After several hours of shelling, Pickett led his men across this open field, and they were cut to pieces. When the battle was over, about half of Pickett's 12,000 men were either dead or wounded laying on the field. Well, after a little bit of trying to find this place, this is actually a national park, or National Historic Site. It's Spotsylvania Battlefield History Trail, where supposedly Grant chased Lee through all these little roads through here. Much of the tour of the battleground here at Spotsylvania Courthouse is an auto tour with a lot of stopping off points along the way where you can park, read the signs. That one's for containing the enemy. They have parking spots along here. Trails. Yeah, they have a lot of trails. You can drive through in about half hour easily, but you could spend all day here if you really wanted to. The Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse was considered on the one hand to be an inconclusive battle because it was fought between
Grant's Army of the North and Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. The Army of Northern Virginia took 13,000 casualties during the battle. This was in May of 1864. The North, on the other hand, took 18,000 casualties. But as one soldier said, one Southern soldier, he could lose men and replace them. We could not. So it really was the beginning of the end for Lee, because it led to his eventual, or the eventual siege of Petersburg and his eventual
Surrender?
surrender at Appomattox Courthouse.
Which isn't that far from here, actually. I think it's only about maybe 50, 60 miles. This is called the Bloody Angle Road and Trail.
Right here, this shows the Mule Shoe. The red line here is the Confederate lines, and this is the way the Union attacked, trying to break down the Confederate lines at the tip of the Mule Shoe. They actually succeeded briefly, but were beat back by the Confederates, and some of the fighting then started to spill over into what was called the Bloody Angle Trail. This was not even halfway through this, 15-day, 2-week-long battle, and it was said to have had some of the worst hand-to-hand fighting in the entire Civil War, right in this area here. Okay, after the initial Union attack at the point of the Mule Shoe, as I said before, it sort of spilled over in what was called the Bloody Angle, which is down there in that field. And it's sort of a little ravine where all the troops were pinched in together, and they fought hand to hand for days at a time. Finally, Grant abandoned the field, just left, and which was why the battle was called inconclusive. But the Confederates had been so bloodied by then that they began to retreat and eventually wound up in Petersburg.
If you look at this little map, you can see, look at all the soldiers that were supposed to be all in one spot there.
It wasn't a huge battle like Antietam, or a long, drawn-out one like Gettysburg, but what gave the Battle of Appomattox Station its historical importance was that it signaled the official end of the Civil War.
Okay, well, here's Richmond up here, and we're way over here. The red dotted lines are the course that Lee's army took, and then Grant's army sort of shadowed him to the south, keeping him from cutting off and going down into North Carolina. And they finally wound up here, and at this point, after the Battle of Appomattox Station, Lee realized that he was surrounded, and that was the end of that. It's interesting that General Custer was involved in this battle. He led about 4,000 about 4,000 cavalry troops into cannon fire to win the battle, and shortly thereafter Lee surrendered the his army to
this is right now too, where Grant's headquarters was, right in this area too.
This house, owned by the McLean family, is the actual site where Lee surrendered to Grant, ending the Civil War on April 9, 1865, one day after the Battle of Appomattox Station.
This is actually the room where Grant and Lee signed the terms of surrender to end the Civil War in 1865. This is an area along this Appomattox Trail where Lee supposedly came down and rode his horse down in this little depression and pointed up to where his headquarters were to say that they have surrendered, and all his men gathered around him. Also, in preparation for the surrender at Appomattox, the Confederate soldiers and officers lined up all their cannons so that they could surrender all their artillery and things. And they said there were hundreds of cannons and other artillery all lined up. Along this fence line is a little road, they call it a trace. And this is the road that led up to the courthouse in Appomattox where Lee rode his horse to sign the surrender papers that ended the Civil War.